This episode brought to you by Transporter. Get your own Transporter today at filetransporterstore.com.
Mission Log Supplemental Number 24, the one with George Takei.
Welcome to the supplemental of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
I'm Ken Ray, and let me stop you right there, John. I would not say welcome to the supplemental. I would say, so far, with the exception of maybe one other, welcome to the supplemental.
Well, is that a little bit of a swipe at some of our other guests?
No, it's not a swipe at some of our other guests, but come on, let's face it. We had a great supplemental recently with Marina Sirtis. Absolutely a fantastic interview to do. Absolutely a fantastic interview to bring to people. Yeah. We had a great interview with Will Wheaton. Absolutely fantastic interview. Absolutely wonderful thing to bring people. I think the Bob Orsi from a little over a year ago now was a really amazing thing, and I think a lot of people like that. And I feel bad about the people that I'm leaving out. But dude, today's episode is so Takei.
Yeah, it is. It's George Takei.
George Takei.
I know.
Yeah. Hey, look, Nichelle Nichols, that was a fantastic interview. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. I loved when we talked to the Gorn. I love when we talked to Bobby Clark. Honestly, yeah. I love all of these, okay?
Yeah.
But this one is just so Takei.
It's a very special Takei episode of Mission Log. But here's the thing. We want to do an interview because it's a little bit different. You would expect that we're going to sit down with George and we're going to talk about Star Trek and tell us about the time you did this and tell us about the time you did that. And sometimes, Ken, you and I will write up all these questions, and I'll write questions, you'll write questions, and we'll share them. We'll look at each other's notes, and then we'll just launch into the interview. And sometimes you start an interview and then all the notes go out the window.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you say, man, I should have closed the window. Now we're just going to have to make stuff up.
Well, fortunately, we didn't have to make up a lot of stuff because George, like a lot of people, because he is so practiced and he's so good, you wind him up and let him go. And we didn't talk a lot about Star Trek.
Yeah. But we talked about,
Yeah,
it's a great interview.
Well.
I don't mean it's a great interview. Like boy, do we do a great job. I just mean, that I am lucky enough, honestly, to have been able to be in on this conversation is just still the kind of thing that amazes me today, and I'm very happy that we get to bring the conversation to other people too.
Well, we wanted to intro it like that to say that we don't talk a lot about Star Trek, but I thought you nailed it pretty well. That what we do is we talk about how George is living the Star Trek life. So I hope that's what people get out of it when they listen to it, because it's really about his values and his interests, and I think you hear that vision of Star Trek throughout what he discusses. So I know that people are going to enjoy that, but we have a little bit of business to take care of before we get to that. As we release this episode, it's right at 2 weeks before the 2015 Creation Entertainment Star Trek Las Vegas convention. I'm going to be there.
I am also going to be there, yes.
Yes. And we will have our table, and I can't wait to see everybody again. That's the best part about it. I look forward to that. We do have a panel scheduled, the Mission Log Live panel scheduled for Sunday in the DeForest Kelley Theater. Please check your local channels for listings, because that may change. We don't know.
Remember last year when we were in the big room on Saturday?
Yeah, they'll never do that again.
I wonder who we upset.
Right.
Oh, well, hey, Sunday, you're going to be walking around. If you're like me, you're going to be walking around Sunday afternoon thinking, well, I don't want it to end. Well, come hang with us, because it will very much not be over until like 5:01.
Right, and then we're just out of there,
which I think is when our panel ends. And then 5:03 we'll be at the Masquerade Bar.
right. 5:04 under a table. But speaking of tables, come to our table in the vendor room too, because we'll have a lot to do there. Not only is it just fun to catch up with everybody and chat, but we got new stuff going on with Mission Log. I don't want to reveal all here. Just come by, because there's new stuff to talk about. And one of the cool things, though, that we can talk about right here is Transporter. So you know that they've supported Mission Log in the past, and they are supporting us again, not only for today's episode, but at the convention, we will have four 4 transporter devices to give away. So one every day. We'll do a drawing every day, and you'll actually get to go home with a transporter device. So if you're at the convention, come by, stop by the table. You'll be able to leave your name, and then you may be lucky and win a transporter. Ken, what is a transporter?
It's that thing that sort of like breaks you down into nothing and moves you all across the galaxy.
Makes you young again, apparently, too.
Yeah, it does. It cures diseases. It does all sorts of things. That's what it is in the Star Trek universe. At our table, a transporter is, you can kind of think of it like an external hard drive, but it's a lot more than that. It's connected to the internet. You hook it up to your computer, but it does not physically hook up to your computer. In fact, it works best if you can use it as an offsite storage. You can use it offsite backup. You can use it to share files with other people. You kind of think of it as your own personal cloud service, like, a Google Docs kind of thing or a Dropbox kind of thing. Except there are a few differences. First of all, your stuff is living on a physical device that you know where it is, and so you have that level of control over it. Whereas, with Google, it's living on their server farms. With Dropbox, it's living on their server farms. And you can trust those, and that's great. But if you're somebody who wants, an added level of security or just, to feel like I know what's going on with my data, the transporter is fantastic for that. It's also great for collaborating with people. So I have this thing that I do on a daily basis. There's a publication for iOS. I do not work with the person who actually does the layout for it. What I do is I take my script, I take the pictures, I put them on my transporter. She actually doesn't have a transporter, but she's able to see, because I've shared this folder with her, she's able to see that that's changed. So she goes in, grabs all the pictures, grabs all the documents, turns it into a magazine, and then puts that back on my transporter, and then I've got that. And we do that on a daily basis, and it works like, it just hums along. So, it really is a neat device. The thing that was most interesting to me, or one of the things that was interesting to me at last year's convention, because they were a supporter of our table last year as well, was talking to people, and they would say, could you do this with it? And I'd think about it for a second. I'm like, yeah, you could actually do that. I mean, the number of different, and that happened like 5-6 times, the number of different ideas that people had, they were like, well, that's interesting. I've been looking for something that would do this. Would it do that? And it really is it sounds really simple to say, it's just an external hard drive. It really is a versatile device, and a lot of people come with their own ideas of how they would use it, and it turns out, it would work like a charm. So, filetransporterstore.com is the site if you want to find out more, or if you want to talk to somebody about it and possibly win a transporter of your very own, do stop by our table, which I think is table number and we'll be happy to shake your hand and say hey and tell you as much or as little about the transporter as you want to know.
Right. Well, what's so cool is that you and Rod and I use a transporter during the production of Mission Log, and you can actually see a video about that if you go to missionlogpodcast.com. And right now, Transporter, this is unheard of in our history with them. They are offering a huge discount. $75 off the purchase of a 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte transporter device for our listeners in North America. If you use the code ML75 at filetransporterstore.com or filetransporter.com/missionlog, then you can get $75 off the purchase of a 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte transporter.
And we do thank them very much for supporting both this show and our time in Vegas. And let me just say, woo! Vegas. Can't wait.
So the first burning question that I have, George, is the naked time. I have to know, was it your call to be shirtless? Because what I picture is they're ready to roll camera, and you say, no, not with this shirt on. Somebody.
Well, as a matter of fact, that episode was being directed by Mark Daniels.
Yes,
and he came to my dressing room, George. Let's see what you look like with the shirt off. And I thought, well, what? Who is this? I mean, he's my director, but and we're in the privacy of my dressing room. What kind of director do we have? I took my shirt off, and he looked me up and down, and he said, "Okay," and then he walked out. And and he sent Minion over to say, we're going to shoot that scene shirtless. So it was not my decision. It was Mark Daniels. He was a very prescient guy, because that's what captured the audience's eye, I think.
Well, the rest is history, indeed.
Well, after he walked out, I got an idea of why he came in to see me shirtless. So I started immediately doing some push-ups and sit-ups to be buffed up for that scene.
Nice.
Let me ask, so, because you're right. It's a thing that you would not have expected. And obviously you say you did not expect the director to come in and ask that. When you got onto Star Trek, when you're doing Star Trek, do you have an idea, like a sense of who Sulu as a character is? Or was Sulu at the time, whatever lines you were handed that week? I mean, did you know this guy, this Sulu character?
I had to build a backstory for him. I mean, that's the actor's job. Yes, as you say, the script was what it was. That was handed to me. Mm-hmm. And it was pretty minimal. I think the longest soliloquy I had was, I sir, Ward 3. But, I tried to bring a little bit of, as a matter of fact, I started lobbying the writers and directors and Gene himself, trying to suggest ideas, to give Sulu a family, or to give Sulu a back life beyond what we saw, his life in Starfleet Academy. None of them took. It was, when you're like fifth or sixth banana, the focus is all on the trio there, the triumvirate. So the effort was, at that time, I thought, for naught, but I kept it up anyway, and ultimately I got a captaincy. So the seeds eventually do germinate in space.
Well, I'd like to ask about that, simply because it seems like there is a game of politics that an actor plays while on a TV show. And you've got a handful of producers, you've got directors coming in different weeks, you've got different writers every week. Can you talk to us a little bit in specifics about who you would go to, who your allies were kind of on the show, and what that process was like for you?
You're asking me to think back 50 years, or almost 50 years. So, the memory grows a little feeble, but... yes, I had, Gene was certainly the most prominent one, and he was a very accessible person to talk to. Morris Chapnick was also a very, he had Gene's ear, so I lobbied him, but he was not as it was difficult to have a genuine back and forth, because I think he was much more guarded, because he was, I think, a bit insecure in his position, so he would not be as communicative, but he would listen. John Black, one of the writers, as a matter of fact, he was the one that wrote Naked Time. He was very chatty, very friendly guy. Norm Spinrad was as well. And amongst the directors, it's hard. I remember Mark, because Mark Daniels, because he directed Naked Time. But if you mention names, I will remember some of the other directors. It's been a long, long time, 5 decades.
Sure.
I want to ask you, first of all, I got to say, you mentioned your captaincy a moment ago. I know so many people who watch Star Trek and watch the movies, and they have particular things that make them cry. Almost everyone cries when, of course, when Spock dies at the end of Star Trek 2.
Yes. Yes.
There are two things that gave me tears when we just recently rewatched the movies. The first was, I believe it was in Star Trek 3, actually, when the captain of the Excelsior tells Kirk, if you leave here, you don't get to come back. If you leave right now, this is it. And he chooses his friend over his position. That's one thing. The thing that totally surprised me, though, at the end of Star Trek 6, when you and Kirk say goodbye to each other as captains and you go flying off, that totally moved me this time in a way that completely surprised me when we were going back and doing the rewatch. I want to ask you about that character, independent of you. When you watch the reboots, or, well, let me ask you, I assume you have. I can't imagine you could have avoided them if you wanted to, but have you watched John Cho playing Sulu on screen at this point?
I have.
When you watch those, are you watching your character, or is John Cho playing some guy in some movie? I mean, since sailing off as captain in Star Trek VI, what do you feel like is your position with that character at this point?
Well, you have to accept the fact that the role has been recast. Mm-hmm. And John is a friend from way back. He worked with us with the East-West Players long before he became a professional actor. And he has taken possession of the role. So I've been able to kind of pull back and contain my Sulu within me. That is John Cho's Sulu that I'm watching, as we are watching Chris Pine's Kirk or Zach Quinto's Spock. I think for me, I approach it as an actor, and I know that each actor brings his own imprimatur to the character, and I accept that. And John's doing a fine job, given what he's given.
I want to ask you, going back to talking about Gene Roddenberry. So you said that he was somebody who was very accessible to you on the original series, and then you had a period in the 70s where the animated series had come along, and then kind of gearing up for phase 2 that then became the motion picture. And I'm curious how you felt your friendly relationship with Gene was over the years, and did that change at all? I know that clearly when you got to the second movie and beyond, he had less of a role to play. It was sort of an honorary title that he was given on those movies. So I'm curious what your personal and professional relationship was like with him over those, a couple of decades, actually.
Well, he once the TV series was canceled, I became very much active in the political arena. And as a matter of fact, I even tossed my hat in the ring for a city council seat when unexpectedly the man I was supporting for mayor of Los Angeles, who did not make it the first time around, Tom Bradley, made it the second time around, and there was that vacancy created. So persuaded by my political friends, I ran for that vacancy. And I asked both Gene and Majel for support and assistance. And Gene was fantastic. My first fundraising dinner that I had at a Chinese restaurant was the ones hosted by Gene Roddenberry, and he was the keynote speaker. And so we got a good number of Star Trek fans as well as political types to come to that fundraiser. And so he was very, very supportive in another arena altogether. And when most of my Star Trek friends were very helpful as well. On my other campaigns, Nichelle, I'd organize a fundraiser for a cause, and we needed an entertainer at those dinners. And Nichelle was always very generous about performing and lending her glorious voice to the event. And she did so with my various fundraisers as well. Walter was very helpful. Leonard was very helpful. Dee is a very shy person, so he did not like dealing with crowds, and I knew that, so I did not ask him. But the others, Dee and And Bill, Bill's a Canadian, so he is not that involved in the American political scene. But the others were very helpful, and I appreciated that. And I think it was because Gene set the pattern. He was the leader again in the political arena for me.
Well, what was it that actually drew you into politics? I mean, you had acted, of course. You still acted. What was it that made you think? I mean, what made you want to run?
Well, I've been political arena and social justice causes. I was involved in the civil rights movement when I was in my late teens. I was involved in the peace movement during the Vietnam War, primarily because as a child, I was imprisoned in U.S. internment camps, imprisoned behind U.S. barbed wire fences, simply because we happened to look like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. It was one of the most egregious violations of the United States Constitution. There were no charges, and therefore no trial, because you need charges to contest in order to have a trial. The central pillar of our justice system, due process, disappeared, and over 120,000 Japanese Americans on the West Coast were rounded up and imprisoned. I was a child then, from 5 to 9 years old, but I do have my childhood memories of that. But when I became a teenager, I started reading omnivorously, and the civics books talked about these shining ideals of our democracy, and I couldn't reconcile that with what I knew to be my boyhood incarceration, and I couldn't find anything about it in our history books at that time. And so I sat down with my father to have him explain to me why that was. And having been inspired by Dr. Martin Luther King, I gave my father a pretty hard time. I challenged him. Why did you go, Daddy? For what reason? And why was the government, with no charges, sending us to prison? And despite the hard time that I gave him, I must say that I learned about our American democracy from a man who, in the middle of his life, in his 30s, lost everything. My father lost everything, his business, our home, our freedom. And yet he was able to educate me on our democracy. He said, our democracy is a people's democracy, and it can be as great as a people can be, but it's also as fallible as people are. And when a nation gets swept up by war hysteria and racism, it's very difficult for true democracy, the ideals of our democracy, to prevail. In fact, even the President of the United States got swept up in that, and he signed an executive order, 9066, which ordered that incarceration. And so he said, our democracy is vitally dependent on people who cherish the ideals of our democracy, the shining ideals, the best ideals, and who are actively engaged in the process. And sometimes you have to hold democracy's feet to the fire. And then to illustrate what he was talking about, he took me to downtown Los Angeles to the Adlai Stevenson for Headquarters campaign. And he says we volunteered, but actually he volunteered me. and I, and it's a lot of fun, a political campaign. And it does have a lot of theater, and I had that theatrical bent, and working with other passionate people, committed to someone who was able to articulate the ideals of our democracy so eloquently, like Governor Adlai Stevenson, really galvanizes people. And so from that Stevenson campaign, I got involved in other political campaigns for U.S. Senate and governor and various social justice issues. And when the movement began to get an apology and redress for that unconstitutional incarceration, I became actively involved in that. I testified at congressional commissions. So I had a history of being active in the political arena, but I thought that I would always be an activist, a volunteer. And I never expected to be running for political office, but in that circumstances, when Tom Bradley, our councilman, ran for mayor, I was the chairman of his Asian American campaign, and so I made a lot of political friends then. And when Tom got elected mayor, those friends said, "I have visibility, ID, because of Star Trek," and so that's a leg up. And I thought, well, this is perhaps another new challenge. I'll boldly go where I've never been before, to coin the phrase. And so I threw my hat in the ring. And as it turned out, I loved it. I loved campaigning. I loved going from door to door, talking issues. I'm having a slight vocal problem, so forgive me. I have a cup of tea here, so I'll take a sip.
Don't worry about it. We actually very often talk about our mutual love of tea on our show. So that'll be our next podcast. So political activism was already an established part of my life. I actually read somewhere that you served for about 10 years on the board of directors for the Southern California Rapid Transit Project, which leads me to ask, when will we have a decent subway throughout Los Angeles?
You mean you haven't ridden our subway?
I have.
It is an outstanding subway system.
It is beautiful.
The most modern subway system in the United States. Shame on you. Are you an Angelino?
I am now. Actually, I live in...
You live here?
I live in the same neighborhood, yeah.
Well, shame on you.
No, I have...
You know, sci-fi fans should be aware of environmental pollution, how we're spoiling the air and the water and the soil that we live in. And the practical part of being an Angelino, I'm sure you hate rush hour traffic.
Oh, of course.
And spending hours. I mean, when you get behind the wheel, you've punched into work already,
Yeah.
Whereas if you use public transit, that time is still yours. You can read the newspaper. If you're sleepy, you can sleep. Or if you're a workaholic, you can do work on the public transit system. And what we made great, in fact, I was the one that spearheaded the Arts in Transit program, where, mothers with children and elderly people are a little skittish about going to an subterranean space where they might be alone. And so we wanted to give those people a sense of security and comfort in our subway stations. And so we have as a policy 1% of the station cost would go into an art project. And the artists were to be selected from the community above the station, and to have that subway station become an extension of the community, and to have a different architect design each station, and the mandate to them was for it to be compatible with the neighborhood above. Washington, D.C. has an outstanding metro rail system.
Oh, yeah.
And they have a handsome architectural pattern. It's appropriate for the national capital. It's the waffle design in every station. It echoes Union Station, the railway station in Washington. But there, because the the architecture is the same, you become very dependent on signage. And they have terrible signage. The letters identifying the stations are tiny and backlit. Here in Los Angeles, our subway systems have an identity of their own. For example, when you roll into the Hollywood and Vine station, you'll see pillars that are shaped like palm trees, and so you're at Hollywood and Vine. When you get to Pershing Square, the art is a neon art, and you're at Pershing Square. You're not dependent on signage. Just the statement of the station tells you that. So as your next assignment this afternoon, you are to go. Where do you live?
I live in the same neighborhood as you, and in fact, I was going to say I've taken the Hollywood and Vine train down to Union Station many, many times. So
good for you. Well, you do use the station. What are you complaining about? I want to hear your complaint.
I just wish we had more. I wish we had a lot more.
Well, yeah, you can't. If we didn't build it, you wouldn't have what you have.
Yeah,
and we can't do it all overnight.
Yeah.
It takes a long time. Believe me, it's a battle. We got the half-cent sales tax passed, and I hope you voted for it. And that was to be the local match. We went to Washington, and it was a real struggle because we have a lot of arch-reactionary congresspeople, and we were able to get the federal match. And then we went to Sacramento. And after we got the funding all together, we had to have public hearings to set the route alignment, and there are some people that wanted it right near their neighborhood. Others that wanted it didn't want to have it anywhere near their neighborhood.
Right.
So you sit through all those public hearings, and then once you get the route alignment set, then the station location. It's you don't know what you're talking about when you think you can get it overnight. It takes years and literally billions. The first leg from downtown LA to Chandler in the Valley cost $4 billion. So you please do your homework before you make a statement like that.
Oh, no.
It takes a long time.
George, I love that we have something at all. Like I said, I just wish we had more. And believe me, I would always vote
and I
for
hope
more
you're contributing to getting more.
Yeah.
Advocating for it rather than bad-mouthing it.
No, not at all.
We need a groundswell of citizens saying, we need this. Let's get it done. Let's get more funding for it. I want it in my neighborhood.
The most worthwhile thing of this conversation is that now on the air for all of our thousands of listeners, I've been publicly shamed by George Takei.
Well, no, you did it to yourself. Complaining about a system and and complaining that it didn't happen overnight. No. The Starship Enterprise is not built with the snap of a finger. Well, it takes a lot of money, and just the set takes a lot of money and a lot of work.
Yeah. And
to build a subway system when you have to bore through underground, just the engineering part of it, but then the social impact of it, the neighborhood complaining, or the businesses complaining, the drivers complaining because they have detours. It is not an easy job. I was in the trenches of that, literally in the trenches for 11 years.
Wow. Yeah. Well,
let me ask you a question. What's fascinating to me is, you start off by talking about being in an internment camp from the age of 5 to 9. You obviously have a tremendous amount of passion for a tremendous number of issues. I did not know about the public transportation issue. Your involvement in it until we sat down here. If you step back a bit, do you consider yourself what's the best way? Are you optimistic or pessimistic about where we're headed, where we are now and where we're headed?
You can't get things done if you're a pessimist. You're defeated already with pessimism. You have to be an optimist. And yes, not rose-colored glasses optimist. Know the realities, but still be to see beyond that. That's what made it possible for Gene Roddenberry to get Star Trek on the air. If he were a pessimist, he would have been defeated by the first rejection. It takes strong vision and an optimistic view, knowing that there are going to be obstacles, knowing that there are going to be opposition, and still be able to see beyond and be a problem solver. How do I deal with that opposition? How do I struggle with that obstacle? How do I overcome that? And then you realize your vision beyond. So I'm an optimist, to answer your question.
There was an episode of The Twilight Zone that, and I'm a big fan of that show, and I think probably a lot of people in our audience are fans of that show, but there was an episode that you did that...
The Encounter.
That according to many sources was not rerun after its original airing. It is available.
It was
now.
not.
It is available now on DVD and Blu-ray. It is available on Netflix, and I watched it very recently, and it was a very controversial show. And just to set it up for the people who have not seen it, and I highly recommend it, you co-star with Neville Brand. He as a war hero, and Neville Brand in real life was a war hero.
That's right.
So this is 20 years after World War II. He's an American GI who's in his attic cleaning out, and he's visited by a young Japanese-American man. And the entire scene takes place in that attic as they sort of rehash the skeletons in the closet, as it were, about their participation or their knowledge of what happened during World War II. And I think that there were a couple of things about that episode that maybe struck the American viewing public at the time as something a bit difficult to grapple with. The idea that this was a very imperfect man, this American GI character, and then the conflict with the young Japanese-American man. I wonder if you could just talk about that with us for a moment and kind of what your mindset was going into that show and then seeing the finished product of that show, particularly given your history, having come from the Japanese internment camps, et cetera.
Yes, no, not Japanese internment camp, because we were not imprisoned by the Japanese.
No, the American.
The Japanese American.
Yes.
You know, I see it in print all the time. Japanese internment camp. It was an American internment camp for Japanese Americans.
Right.
Or a shorter way of saying it is Japanese American internment camp, because it's plain English. You know, there were Japanese prisoners of war camp. They were run by the Japanese. And when you say Japanese internment camp, it sounds like it was run by the Japanese.
Right.
It was not.
No,
we were imprisoned in our own country by our own government. It's a Japanese-American internment camp. Please get that term correctly.
Of course.
I'm always correcting people
That's fine.
on that. But on the Twilight Zone, I got the script for that. As a matter of fact, the director of that script was the assistant director on the Playhouse 90 I did, which was one of the most distinguished live 90-minute television drama on television at that time. It's a landmark series written by some of the most talented upcoming young writers of that time, people like Reginald Rose, Patty Chayefsky, Rod Serling was one of them. He wrote some of the most memorable scripts for Playhouse 90, and I did a script titled Made in Japan, playing a young Japanese soldier who returns to post-war Japan, a defeated soldier. And it was a wonderful part. I was betrothed to a Japanese girl played by Nobu McCarthy, who I discover when I come back to Japan is in love with an American soldier, part of the occupying force. And the two of them have a lover's quarrel on a bridge, and she accidentally falls off that bridge. And I'm, as the embittered we weren't lovers. It was an arranged marriage. Embittered potential groom and a defeated soldier is the one that's accused of it. And so it was a great part. And the assistant director on that was a guy named Bob Butler, who went on to become a director very quickly. It was a year after I did Playhouse 90, I think. And he called me in to play that part. I read the script. It was fantastic. A two-hander with a lot of juicy red meat there. The script was a Twilight Zone script. You know, those are fantastical scripts. They're not realistic. I mean, Bill Shatner did one where someone's on the he's flying in a plane and someone's on the wing of a plane up in the air. Right. You know, it's not true. It's fantasy. Well, the problem with the Twilight Zone script encounter was people took that literally. Neville Brand was a real war hero, and he was playing a veteran of the Pacific War, and I was playing a Japanese American, and we were imprisoned in the internment camps because we were, just because of our face, because we looked like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. We were thought to be potential spies, saboteurs, fifth columnists. And that fantasy, and a Japanese American having a father involved in that, was pure fantastical. But it was still too close to the war, only 20 years. And the sensitivities were still strong. And the Japanese American Citizens League, which is comparable to the NAACP from the African American community, objected to it, and CBS was very responsive to that, and they pulled it from any second airing, and it wasn't until the series was off and they made a DVD of the entire series, or video of the entire series, that people got to see it for a second time. But I understand the sensitivities back then. But I thought, it's Twilight Zone, and people would accept it as Twilight Zone. But they said it's too close to reality, and that's what we were accused of potentially being. So being very thoughtful and responsive to those concerns, CBS pulled it for the run of the TV series.
Along a similar line, I mean, obviously not similar because it's not the same topic, but I guess it's 21 years after the end of World War II that you're actually sitting at the helm of a starship that sort of reads a little bit like a UN, if you think about it. I mean, there are a number of people represented from a number of different cultures, including alien cultures. Was there anything like, did you face any kind of blowback, or did the show face any kind of blowback, or did you personally hear any sort of bad tidings about the fact that you were on this show, or since there was no specific World War II tie-in, did people look at you as, oh, there's a guy on the bridge of the Enterprise, or was there still some sort of hold, some sort of animosity or racism even?
Star Trek was a landmark production, and that the very diversity, the visual diversity as well as the audible diversity, was the point of the show. Mm-hmm. Yes, as you said, it was the United Nations in the future. All cultures and ethnicities were visible there, working together in concert. That was the point. And so, no, I'm not aware of any negative blowback. If anything, it was overwhelmingly positive. And as a matter of fact, when there was the prospect of cancellation after the second season, and the letter writing campaign was mounted by the fans, my father joined in on that, and he pointed out that very thing, that it shows America in its diversity, in its rich diversity, coming together and working in concert. It is a powerful statement. And he at the beginning of his letter, he said, "I'm George Takei's father, so obviously I'm biased." But the statement being made by Star Trek is something that is an important statement to be made. The ratings may be low, but my father said he believes it will grow, and so I cast my vote for a renewal for a third season, and I was very touched by that. I never expected my father to be writing letters like that, and he was the one that actually tried to give me some guidance when I said I wanted to be an actor. the typical guidance that a parent would give to a child who wants to go into the acting arena. But nevertheless, he supported me on that when he saw that I was working on a show like that. And everything I got from the Asian American community was overwhelmingly and strongly positive.
So you were very much aware, even at the time, that Star Trek had a political and social voice beyond simply the adventure in space. I think that there may be a lot.
How could anyone not be? I mean, what was the blowback? You're aware of some negative blowback?
No. I was honestly asking just you on a personal level.
Oh, a
because that was not
journalistic question.
That was not something that I had heard about. And I was just wondering if it was anything that you would. Honestly, this is something that John and I talked about when we were first going through the original series, I guess a couple of years ago now. One of the great things that Star Trek did was just treat what was happening on the Enterprise as de rigueur in a way. I mean, one of my favorite scenes, honestly, is when I think it was like the fourth or fifth episode, Uhura is walking around bored. And she's in space. And she's doing things that we will never be able to do in our lifetimes. And she's kind of bored because it's sort of same old, same old. And what's fantastic is you get that, I mean, on so many levels in Star Trek, including the fact that, hey, we're in the middle of a Cold War as people are sitting there watching this, but there's Chekhov. Well, actually, he didn't get there until season 2, but you get the idea. And there's Uhura, and there's Sulu, and there's this guy with the pointy ears. I mean, the fact that it's just... It's with the exception of when Kirk is actually trying to upset Spock because there is something that he has to have done. All of these different people are just working together, and nobody's making a big deal about the fact that all of these people are working together because they got work to do.
Well, the civil rights movement is raging when Sheriff Bull Connor is setting the fire hose and attack dogs on other people. You know, unarmed people demonstrating. And how far have we come from that situation 50 years ago today, when you have what's happening in Baltimore today, or the name of the city, Ferguson, has become the label for that sort of thing. Unarmed young African-American men being shot down by law enforcement officers. You know, lawlessness. I mean, innocent people, unarmed, who happen to be young and black, being shot down. And it's happening time after time after time. It's been happening. And so we may have come a long way to have an African-American president. But here we are. How far have we advanced? 50 years ago, this year, the voting rights bill was signed by President Lyndon Johnson, and there's still voter suppression going on. We have a lot of work still to do.
Let's talk about another civil and social rights issue that is near and dear to your heart, because I know that you actively campaigned for marriage equality in California and in the rest of the United States. And I'd like to talk about that on kind of a personal level for you. Mm-hmm. I read your autobiography, To the Stars, and enjoyed it immensely. And when I was done with it, I thought, well, this is great information, and it's a fun and engaging read. But there was something missing, and that was the personal element. I didn't know about your relationships, and not that it's any of my business, but it did seem...
Oh, no, if I'm writing an autobiography, clearly it belongs in an autobiography.
Right.
But I was being true to the me of that time. I would not have been an actor. I could not have done Star Trek. I could not be who I am today because of the climate of the time. It was foolish. First of all, just to pursue an acting career for anybody was a big throw of the dice. Mm-hmm. Here, it's my life that I'm committed to a career in such an uncertain arena. But then, if I were to be fully me, who I really was, a gay American, I would not be cast. I would never be working as an actor. I had to be closeted. Because I remember it was when I was in my teens, there was a stunningly good-looking blonde actor who was in almost every other movie coming from Warner Brothers as the romantic lead, a guy named Tab Hunter, clearly a made-up name. But he was constantly working, and he was a heartthrob. But when it was exposed, one of the sensational rags exposed him as gay, he faded. He disappeared from view. And that was an object lesson for me. You cannot be gay and hope to have an acting career. So I was closeted all the way through. And I was active in all these other social justice issues, the civil rights movement, the peace movement during the war, the redress for Japanese Americans for the unconstitutional incarceration. But I was silent on the single issue that was organic to me. That was an immutable part of me. I'm gay. But I passionately wanted my career. That was my life. So the silence on the gay issue in my autobiography, which was published in 1994, was a true reflection of the me then. Yes, at that time, I was going to gay bars. I've had relationships, but if I had talked about that, my career would have been gone. I may not have appeared in Star Trek VI as Captain Sulu. That was the reality, and I was reflecting that reality of the times.
Well, can I ask, how did that sit with you then as somebody who is very aware of the political voice of the show Star Trek that says everybody has a seat at the table, everybody is equal, we can all work together, and then you're holding on to this?
Did the show really show the gay issue? No, it did not.
No.
As a matter of fact, I had a very private conversation with Gene, and he said, I'm walking a tightrope. All these issues are not being dealt with on other shows. I can deal with it because I'm metaphorically dealing with it in terms of science fiction. And so, I'm dealing with it. And I can do it. But did you also know that in that episode where Kirk kisses Uhura, a black and white kiss, that was one of our lowest rated shows because the southern stations wouldn't carry it. So our ratings for that episode plummeted. That's how dangerous a tightrope Gene was walking. And he said if he dealt with the gay issue, then it would have been kaput. He would not be able to make any statement. That was the reality of the times, and Star Trek reflected that.
how did you know that the time was right for you to then be
How did I know?
and be who you are now publicly, to be out?
Yes.
And, yeah.
In 1969, the same year that Star Trek was canceled, something else that was that impacted me profoundly happened all the way across the country in New York City, in Greenwich Village. There's a gay bar called the Stonewall Inn,
Mm-hmm.
and when the police raided that inn, that gay bar, the police had been raiding gay bars throughout history, and it happened in Los Angeles too. Here were gay people and lesbians enjoying each other's company, relaxed, their guard down, and the police would raid them and make them march out of the bars and put them on paddy wagons and take them down to the police station, fingerprint them, take a picture of them, the mugshot, and put their names on a list. This was terrorism by law enforcement officers. They were innocent people, but they were criminalized simply because they perceived gay people in a stereotype, in the same way that Japanese Americans were perceived in terms of stereotype, not as who we really were. I mean, we were doctors and teachers and yes, railroad workers and farmers, but we looked like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor, and that's why they imprisoned us. And the same thing was happening with gay people, with these raids on gay bars. And the people in the Stonewall Inn that summer of 1969 wouldn't take it anymore, and they started throwing things at the police that came in, ashtrays, beer bottles, chairs, and they retreated and called for reinforcement. But in the meantime, their phone calls were made from inside the bar to their friends in Greenwich Village, and gays and lesbians came pouring out. And that was the Stonewall riots, which turned into a movement, the gay liberation movement. And I wanted to be a part of that, but I wanted my career and my livelihood. So I was silent through it. But that movement started to affect a society, and society began to change. And in 2004, Massachusetts, the State Supreme Court of Massachusetts ruled that marriage equality was constitutional. And then the year after that, in 2005, this time legislatively, not judicially, but through the legislature, both houses of the California legislature, the Assembly and the Senate, passed the marriage equality bill. All it needed to get to become the law of the state was the signature of the governor, who happened to be Arnold Schwarzenegger at that time. When he ran for governor, he said, "I'm from Hollywood. I've worked with gays and lesbians. Some of my best friends are gays and lesbians." So he became governor with that kind of political rhetoric. And I thought he is probably going to sign it. But his base was the right-wing Republican base, and he responded to that, and he vetoed that bill. And my blood was boiling. But I was still home. I'd been together with Brad for a long time now. He's my husband now. And we were watching the late night news, and I saw young people pouring out onto Santa Monica Boulevard, venting their rage against Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I felt the same way. And here we were at home watching TV. And so Brad and I talked about it, and I decided, well, it's time that I finally spoke up. And so I talked to the press for the first time in 2005 as a gay man, and I blasted Arnold Schwarzenegger's veto. And ever since then, I've been very active, as I've been active on other social justice issues, on equality for LGBT people, and it is very liberating. I feel truly who I am now.
You know, we've been talking about kind of the parallel of Star Trek and civil and social rights and the progression of humanity. And you said that you're an optimist, and I think we all very much admire and respect the kind of work that you do on the social front. And I'm curious, what do you think are the most important topics that need to be addressed by us now to ensure that we get to this better, progressive, more egalitarian future?
You know, that's a very journalistic question. The most, most important, the most lovable, the most, there are so many issues. I mean, there are international issues and there are domestic issues that are crucially important. And there are global issues that are vital to us. Internationally, we have this Islamic terrorism, which comes out of nowhere. It just happened yesterday in Texas, and it happened in 9/11. Religious extremists who become murderous is what we have to deal on this terrorism issue. It's very important. It's literally a life and death issue. Domestically, we've been talking about a lot of the issues that still exist today. The Ferguson, the Baltimore issue. It's the core of that issue is racism. Racism is still here. The immigration issue boils down to racism here again. After 9/11, I happen to be the chairman of the board of the Japanese American National Museum, which we founded. And we Japanese Americans immediately sensed what might happen with Arab Americans in this country. And, Arab Americans have been here for generations now. And so we immediately organized a candlelight ceremony, and we invited leaders of the Arab American community to join us, and we had older Japanese Americans. I was a child then, so my perspective is quite different on my personal perspective is different on that. So we had older Japanese Americans talk about that. And because the museum is 2 blocks from City Hall, the candlelight ceremony turned into a candlelight march to City Hall and back. And because LA Times is right across from City Hall, we got a lot of good coverage. But I decided that we've got to do more. The biggest Arab American community in the United States is in Dearborn, Michigan, of all places. Who would have thunk? And so we moved our board meeting, the next board meeting, to Dearborn. And again, we invited leaders from the Arab American community there in Dearborn to speak with us. And so, there's this issue of race that we still haven't come to grips with. We fought a bloody civil war over it, and it didn't. And now we're going through the anguish of all these police shootings. So on the domestic issue. But I kind of touched on the environmental issue when I talked about public transportation. The very air that we breathe, the water that we drink, the food that we eat that's grown out of the soil, they're all being polluted. Last year I was in Beijing, and the air there is unbelievably filthy. We had our masks on all the time there. Man's suicidal despoiling of the very environment that we live in. And there's still politicians in America who say, I'm not a scientist. We know they're not scientists. They're politicians. Mm-hmm. And yet, they try to avoid answering that. They have their heads like ostriches in the ground. So there isn't one single issue that is the greatest. On many levels, we have great threats to civilization and to our existence.
And yet you're optimistic.
I'll get off my soapbox.
No. That was.
But you dragged out the soapbox for me, so I just climbed on top of it.
Yeah, no, I mean that's what we talk about on our show. It's what are the multitude of issues that were raised in popular culture that have a true and real world impact that need to be
precisely
addressed.
Because that's what Star Trek dealt with.
Yeah.
Star Trek 4 was about the environment and our interrelationship with the whales, specifically in that case. So all this is relevant to a discussion of Star Trek.
And yet we get emails saying, I like your discussion about Star Trek 4, just not all the environmentalism.
It is the same.
Well, we infinite diversity and infinite combinations.
Yeah.
We get ignorant people as well as brilliant people. Neil deGrasse Tyson is a Star Trek fan, and he will not agree with that fan the fan that you quoted.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to me that, you can lay out all of those, honestly, what sound like dire things that we're facing, and yet you declare yourself an optimist as well. A lot of the things
we can wallow in the dire things,
right.
But life is really wonderful too. That's why we love life.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we're optimistic. That I'm just looking out at my garden, and there's that lavender flower that's flowering, and the roses are bursting white. It's the world we live in is infinite diversity and infinite combinations, with the good and the bad and the ho-hum as well. So, I deal with everything, but because I love the wonderful things, I try to deal with the horrible things that keep us from enjoying the wonderful things of life.
So then, with a lot of the things that, especially in social media and places that were sort of hit with culturally, you tend to approach a lot of the issues that you address in very sort of humorous ways. Is that intentional, or is that just who you are?
Oh, absolutely. Sometimes you can get fish shaking, teeth gritting, serious about things,
mm-hmm.
but sometimes you can be more effective by putting it in a larger context and seeing the silliness of it all. And
which is how Star Trek is able to do what Star Trek was able to do. Oh no, we're not talking about racial issues. It's a bunch of guys in space.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's resilience is the ability to while dealing with the challenges, to be able to find the joy in life as well. People still fall in love. People still get married. They have children, Isn't that wonderful?
All right, Ken, I first of all, thank you again to George Takei for coming on. I feel the need to defend myself. Okay.
Oh, sure. While he's not here, I know what you're going to do. No, you really, no, dude.
Yeah, I'm doing this. Okay. As I've told you, all right. Yeah. I've lived in New York. I've lived in Chicago. I've traveled to many great cities: London, Paris, Tokyo. And I have ridden some fantastic public transportation. No
mm-hmm.
question about it. Living in Los Angeles, we have some beautiful light rail stations, some beautiful subway stations. We are not known for having the greatest public transportation system in the world. We're
mm-hmm.
not known for having the most extensive public transportation system in the world. Things are better. And obviously we have Mr. Takei to thank for some of that progress in a big
mm-hmm.
way. So thank you, George, for doing that. But, my point was not that all this doom and gloom in L.A. and we have nothing here. We actually have some great stuff here, and I love living in this city. It's just when you stack up the great cities of the world and you look at the ones that have had fantastic public transportation systems for 100 years or more, L.A. usually doesn't make that list. That's all I'm saying.
Here's the angle that I think Mr. Takei was taking.
Okay.
I quote the Muppets. Life's like a movie. Write your own ending. Keep believing. Keep pretending. Look, you don't talk bad about the public transportation system and expect it to get better. You talk about people using the public transportation system, and maybe they do, and then it gets better because there's more money going into it, and there are more people saying, "Well, this is great if it went more than 10 blocks." I mean, So I'm just saying. I think he is obviously his excitement about things, and it's especially amazing when you consider how difficult things were early on in life.
Sure.
His excitement and the fact that he was only able to come out relatively recently too. I mean, in some ways, he has not lived necessarily as freely or as openly. I mean, both literally and figuratively as he might like, and yet his level of excitement and exuberance for things is infectious. And I think he probably thinks that one of the ways to do that is to maybe speak a bit more positively than say the LA train sucks.
Hey, I have fully enjoyed the LA subway for a good 10 blocks.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah.
See? There you go.
Maybe
say that. One time I had to get from point A to point relatively close to B, and it was an awesome ride.
Like A.5. And it was fantastic. So,
all right, so there you go. And I feel certain he doesn't listen to the show, so you're probably safe in having made your comment.
It's funny, I didn't get to mention that while you were shaming me about public transportation, the thing that came back into my head was 2 years ago I filmed an interview with you, George, and you told me that I needed to do more push-ups, that I wasn't your type. So twice now, I've been the punchline for George Takei. So.
Well, are you doing your push-ups?
Well, you told me to, so yeah.
Oh, you good.
I have to.
Good. I'm glad you listened to me.